Some of the biggest questions come in about financing, and of course, most agents aren't lenders, and if you are teamed up with an agent that also happens to be a lender and is also doing your loan, I've always thought that those circumstances should definitely have a lot of caution thrown to the wind. So you might want to think about that particular relationship, but again, not trying to bag on anybody. Let's talk a little bit about the financing aspect. Now, as far as real estate goes, an agent usually does that very well. When you start doing loans and real estate at the same time, it's not that a person isn't capable of both, but it feels a little bit questionable at times just because of the sheer numbers involved. One of the things that I would suggest is find out exactly if that's saving you any kind of money. And then also you want to make sure that the real estate part of the transaction, that funding, whatever that's going to cost you, and then whatever the lending side is going to cost you, and then of course what that interest rate, what you're going to get for the real estate services, what you're going to get for lending part of it as far as interest rate goes. You need to see if that stuff makes sense to you. Now, moving on into the rest of the financial cycle, people often ask, lender gets all my personal information, starts to run my credit. Should I be concerned? Well, usually that step is more than just a casual cup of coffee in the dating world. Usually, once you give up your information and the lender has it, usually it's where we're kind of going steady thing. So you might actually be teamed up with them. Now, that doesn't mean you can't break it off if you want to, but one of the things I would do before I get that deep with a lender is I would find out how they function and how they work. One of the biggest complaints I hear is lenders not being available. So the person that's using the lender to borrow money, sometimes they find out later in the process when they're trying to get questions answered at 0 hour, depending on when they're needing these questions answered. And you might think, well, real estate should only be 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. People look at houses over weekends, on holidays, and after hours. The issue is sometimes these questions need to be answered. If you're dealing with an entity, a lending entity, if you will, that doesn't respond except for Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, that could be a real big pain point. And in fact, I see many people jumping from credit unions and regular mainline banks over to mortgage brokers because of the nimbleness that they exhibit. They're able to get those questions answered on weekends, after hours, during holidays. And of course, why would you need to know something at those times? Because maybe you're exceeding your pre-approved amount. Maybe you're wanting to find out if a certain complex, condominium, or townhome are approved for your specific type of loan. If you're an FHA or a VA borrower, you might want to make sure that if you're buying a condo or a townhome, and even some detached condos, if those properties will fit within the criteria so you can actually get that loan, because it really seems a shame if the market's moving quickly, you want to make an offer because you can't get in touch with your lender. Now, of course, everything's going to be able to wait a few hours. That's probably not a big deal, but it's going to depend on the seller of the property and when the seller is going to review offers. Most sellers will wait a little bit of time to get an additional offer, especially if it's the difference between one offer and two offers, because with two offers, the seller is able to set those against each other and then start to basically try to get their best and most solid offer from whichever party will go to that next level. Now, if both parties go to the next level, then the seller needs to look at different things, types of financing, maybe contingency removal, what's going on as far as the timeline goes. Within contracts, there's so many days to do a certain type of investigation on the buyer's end of it. Maybe that seller needs to look at to see if any of those buyers might be willing to compress those timeframes, not waive them all together. And trust me, in a very heated market, which we're probably going to see Q1, beginning of Q2 of 2025, we're going to see a lot of these contingencies being removed pretty quickly right off the bat. And a contingency in a real estate transaction for a buyer is a right. So when buyers start to remove or shrink down or compress those contingency timeframes, they're basically messing with the rights that they have naturally. Now, to be competitive, there are certain things that a buyer might be able to change. They might be able to reduce timeframes it's going to take them to get an inspection done and to get a formal request for repairs written, or some kind of conversation with that particular seller for things that they discover that weren't at first glance when they went through the property that was pointed out to them by a home inspector or someone else. It's important, though, to make sure when you go in, when there is a buyer asking for things from the seller, even with that beginning offer, let's say you want the seller to take less than asking price and you're writing an offer that is less than what they want for the property. Usually those offers are best accompanied with documentation showing why you believe this property is actually valued less than the seller thinks at the forefront. Now, of course, sellers are more than likely taking advice from their agent. They're probably going online, looking at the syndication systems, the Zillows, the Redfins. They're pulling off those datas, and that's what they're providing for those properties when they're putting them on the market for sale. They also might get information from the real estate agent. The agent typically is probably going to be relying on the appraisal comparisons that have happened over the past 6 months with regard to other properties that are very similar to the seller's property and very nearby that have actually closed escrow with loans. Those are properties that they'll be able to see where those values are. Having said that, when you're looking at those values, if there happens to be a particular property that the agent, and I'm talking to you sellers out there, the agent's going to use to try to convince you of a price that you might not have in mind or something lower, make sure that that comp is actually valid and will be valid when you get into escrow and hopefully close escrow on the property. Because if it expires, if it's an older comparable, something that might have sold 5.5 months ago, when the appraisers typically look at a 180-day or a 6-month standard, that's something that you'll want to know at least going in. Now, if there's plenty of properties to compare yours to that have sold in the past 6 months, and especially in the last 3 months, you're golden. More than likely, it's probably going to go all the way. But sometimes, and I'll say this very carefully, sometimes the syndication websites out there that are giving you sellers values on homes, and sometimes people that you're looking to get value from, sometimes they try to put data in there that influences you to do something. And especially if they might be competing with other vendors out there, maybe the syndication sites have their own agent, maybe you have your own agent, your agent's being honest and upfront with you, telling you that your property is worth X amount of dollars, but the syndication site or this online platform is saying it's worth much, much more. Most sellers, you're going to go with, well, the more option. Unfortunately, if that more option isn't verified anywhere, and if you're just getting the data based on old information, you're going to be sitting on the market quite a while, probably without an offer. Then you're going to be playing the chase the market down game when it comes to price reductions and price changes. You buyers out there, when you're making offers on these sellers' properties that happen to be overpriced or maybe asking for a little bit more than the market will bear, you want to give them the data that's necessary to make the best decision when responding to you. That also falls in line with you asking for credits and repairs within the escrow process after you have your investigations completed. If there is an outlet, let's say, that needs to be replaced because it's not functioning, you wouldn't have probably seen that going in your original visit of the property. Maybe a home inspector brought that to your attention. This particular outlet might be $20 to buy at Home Depot, maybe another $100 to have an electrician roll out. If you're going to ask the seller for $1,000 credit for that single outlet, you better be able to back that up in some type of form, either by a quote from somebody or not. And if it's that much more than the actual price, you're going to probably end up irritating the seller. So just be wary. Everybody can get what they want in a real estate transaction if everybody plays fairly. Don't handle it from an emotional point of view. This is business. And while I have clients that I tell this to all the time, the emotions thing is heavy, sometimes they come back and they have real issues. I remind them, this is a non-emotional business proposal and business plan. So we'll work through that together, and I'll always remind my clients. When you get to Santa Clarita open houses, please check out my book. I did post it there. This is a quick real estate update, just talking about kind of the mental we get and finish out December of 2024. 2025 is going to be exciting. You can just wait to see what's going to happen. We're going to have more inventory hit the market Q1 and Q2. The buyer drive is going to increase. Interest rates probably are going to remain very steady. The economy is probably going to start to get even more better at that time. And that being the case, usually interest rates don't move too much. But that could all change with not much happening. You'll see what I'm talking about as we get into next year. Check this out, my blog at SantaClaritaOpenHouses.com. I'm Connor with Honor. Thank you for watching. We will talk to you soon. Over and out.